All right, well, welcome once again. So we're here in week number 3, starting with American history. So that's going to be the topic for our class today. So if you'll notice, it says American History Part 1. That's because on the citizenship test, there are many different questions about American history. So today we're going to talk about the early part of American history. And then in the next couple of weeks, we're going to continue talking about different times, different historical times in our history. So the first topic we're going to talk about today is referring to what we call colonial history. Everyone, let's say that together. Colonial history.
Colonial history.
Yeah. Saba, do you know what colonial means?
I think places that America colonized before, like for example, Puerto Rico.
Well, you're close. Actually, this history is going to talk about when the United States was part of another country. So, for example, if we think about like Sylvain, for example, from the Congo, they were originally a colony of France or Belgium. Sorry, Belgium. So they spoke French. So in this case, here in our part of the world, we were part of the British, the English Empire. So we were a colony of England for many, many years. So that's the first thing we're going to talk about today. So we're going to be looking at that colonial history. Okay? So let's jump in and talk about this first topic. Okay? So the first thing we're going to talk about, especially when it comes to American history, is a group of people called the Pilgrims. Everyone, let's say that word, Pilgrims. Now, maybe you've heard of the word Pilgrims before, but the Pilgrims are those first sort of English people who came from England. Okay, so let me zoom in here so we can see the map a little better. Okay. All right, see if we can see it. There we go. So those first English people came from England. So there's England right there. Everyone see that? Okay. And they came from a little port town called Plymouth. So it was called Plymouth, England. So they took their boat, okay, and they crossed the Atlantic Ocean. Remember the Atlantic Ocean, right? So we're crossing the Atlantic Ocean. And when they came to the New World, when they came to this part of the world, they came to this particular location. Now, you might say, Mr. John, it says here that the name of the place was Plymouth, Massachusetts. Well, that was not the name when they came. That's the name they gave the place. So if you notice, they came from Plymouth, England, and they gave the name Plymouth to this place. Now, today, this place is called Plymouth, Massachusetts. Now, I've been to Plymouth, Massachusetts, so I've been and I've seen some of the history there of these first people. Now, once again, the name of this particular group, we call them the Pilgrims. Everyone, let's say that word, Pilgrims.
Pilgrims.
Yeah, so now again, I know some of you speak French, so maybe Saba, you and Sylvain can help me here. I don't speak French. But in Spanish, for example, in Spanish, we use the word peregrino. Peregrino. So I don't know. Do you know the word in French? Do we know the French word?
It's about the same word.
How do you say it in French?
Pellegrini.
Okay. So yeah, so that's what the word pilgrim means in English. So again, Elena doesn't speak Spanish, right, or French, but we'll talk about the meaning of that word pilgrim, because pilgrim is not their name. It's referring to people who are traveling. So these people were traveling from England to come to the New World, and it was a long time ago. So again, 1620 was when they left their country. So guys, I'm going to ask you to help me out in this first activity. We're going to learn a little bit about the Pilgrims. So what I would like to do is I'm going to read this little story, and you see here these words. I want you guys to help me fill in the missing words in this story. Okay, can you guys help me with that? Can we do that? All right, well, let's try it, okay? So guys, help me out in the first one. In Sep what?
September.
September. Very good. So in September of 1620,
Yeah.
so 1620, so guys, I was not alive in 1620, okay? So I'm old, but I'm not that old. So in September 1620, the Pilgrims left Plymouth, England, okay? Now, I'll help you with this next part. The Pilgrims were 102 people.
Okay.
So, for example, there were 50 men.
Mm-hmm.
How many women do you think? Look at the numbers up here. What do you think?
32.
52 women.
32.
50 women.
Yeah.
Two children.
32.
Well, first off, we had 50 men, so I think we actually had 32 women. Yeah, and how many children do you think? Maybe 20?
20.
Yeah. Well, let's see. Let's do the math. That's 82. That's 102. All right. Congratulations. So you had the men, women, and you had the children. Now, the question is, why did the Pilgrims come here? Well, remember, pilgrim, peregrino, that word means religious traveler. So in this case, the Pilgrims wanted religious freedom. Yeah, there's the word right there, right? Freedom. Okay. The Pilgrims came here by boat. Now this is the boat right here. This is not a photograph, guys. This is a painting, right? They didn't have cameras. They didn't have selfies in 1620, right? So when you guys take selfies, right? The Pilgrims didn't have selfies at the time. So this is a painting. But this boat is called the Mayflower. Everyone, let's say that word, Mayflower.
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 You can go to Plymouth, Massachusetts, and you can see a copy of the Mayflower boat. In fact, if we have a few extra minutes, I'll show you a picture, because guys, this is a very important year. If you notice, the year here is 1620. What year is it right now? What year is it now?
2020.
It's 2020. It's 2020. So this is the 400 anniversary. This is a big year for this story. So actually, you can go and see this boat, a copy of this boat. So anyway, it's called the Mayflower. Now, the next part I'll help you with a little bit. So the trip took. Now I'll give you a hint. It took, so they started in September and they actually came in November. So which number do you think I'm going to use? We already used 20. We used 32. It's 2, yes. It took 2 months. Would you like to travel on a boat for 2 months?
No way.
No way. Absolutely not. I don't like 2 hours on a plane, right? Okay.
If it is cruise.
Well, I don't think the boat was very fun. Okay. All right. What about the next one? The trip was very dangerous. Yes, it was very dangerous. Yes. Yeah. Yes. So in this case, the trip was very dangerous. And in fact, the last answer there is one pilgrim died on the boat. Yeah, they died on the Mayflower. So that's actually not, I mean, that's actually amazing that only one person died on the boat. But you'll learn that after they came that first year, it was a very difficult life. Very difficult. Okay, so far we've learned some things already. Those first people who came here were called the Pilgrims. And they came in a boat called the Mayflower. And they landed here in November of 1620. All right, excellent. We're off to a great start. Let's continue in our story. Now, those pilgrims, their first winter here was very difficult, guys. Take a look at the story here. So I'm going to ask some people to help me. So Saba, can you help us and read a little bit of this story for us? Can you see it there?
Okay.
Can you read it for us, please?
16, yeah.
Go ahead.
In November 1620, the Pilgrims arrived in North Africa.
North America.
North
That's
America.
a different, very different place. Yes.
Today it is called Plymouth,
Plymouth.
Massachusetts. The pilgrims were happy and thankful to arrive. They were thankful for their new life and freedom, but they were worried and nervous about the future. It was a bad winter. It was cold and snowy outside. They needed food and clean water. They needed warm houses and clothes. In December, they looked for a good place.
Now think about this, guys. They came in November, but they didn't actually leave the boat until December. So they actually stayed on the boat. They lived on the boat for about a month. And the problem is when they came to the New World, it was winter. Now, guys, winter in Massachusetts looks like this. Lots of snow.
It's really bad.
It's terrible. It's a terrible
Yeah.
time to land in the New World. Yeah, very cold, very snowy. Do you guys like snow? Sylvain, do you like snow?
Yes, I like.
Do you like it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I
Yeah?
like
Oh,
snow.
Elena, you like snow. Oh, okay. Well, I don't know if Sylvain likes snow. He comes from a warm country. Maybe he doesn't like it. Well, anyway, it was very cold. Now, guys, listen carefully. After that first winter in 1620, 50%, half of these pilgrims died. Listen again, half of them. So there were 102. Half of them died. Many of them were the women. Yeah, so as you can see, that was a very difficult first year. And without the women, they didn't know how to cook. They didn't know how to make food. So this was a very difficult first year. That first winter for the pilgrims, very difficult, very difficult. Okay? All right. Now, I just want to read this next part very quickly. We're not going to do all of the answers on this page, but I just want to share with you that, of course, before these pilgrims arrived, other people were living here in this part of the world. And I think many of you probably know this. So these people we often call American Indians, or
Native
sometimes we call them the Native Americans, right?
American.
Yeah, so believe it or not, when they came here, there were many Native Americans living here. So there was a big American Indian tribe already living here, and their names were called the Wampanoag. Everyone, you say that, Wampanoag.
Wampanoag.
Yeah, now believe it or not, there are still Wampanoags living in that part of the world in Massachusetts today. Not many, not very many. In fact, if you see this person here, this picture, again, this is not a photograph from 1620, okay? This is a photograph from the 1990s or 2000s. But this young man here, believe it or not, there are still some Wampanoags that live in that part of the world. So yes, we still do have some native people living here in this part of the world, okay? All right, now guys, I think we're about ready to move on to our first sets of questions. But before we do that, let's finish with this little description. What was life like living in this part of the world? So, Elena, I'm going to ask you to help me this time. So, Elena, if you could help us and read this information for us. Can you do that for me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, please.
The pilgrims' new town was called Plymouth, after a town in England. Plymouth houses were similar to houses in England. In the first year, many pilgrims got sick and died. The next year, the
Try it again, Wampanoag.
Wampanoag
There you go.
Indians helped the pilgrims. The Indians were the pilgrims' teachers. The Indians helped the pilgrims build houses, grow plants, and hunt animals. Life was better in Plymouth the next year.
Yeah. Now, everybody, if you look at the picture here at the top, this painting, this is just, again, an artist, painted this picture. So this is not a photograph. But as you can see, it does look very similar to the places where people lived in England. But if you look at this picture here, So if you go to Plymouth, Massachusetts, and you can go and visit it, they have created a copy of the original Plymouth town. There, you can actually go and see it. In fact, you can go there and actually eat food too. So they actually have, created this or kind of original look. But again, we don't have photographs. We don't really know exactly what it looked like. Okay, so the idea is to think about that first year. Those pilgrims really, they suffered. They had many problems, but these native people did help them. They helped them how to show them how to grow food, and they did help them to survive. So that's going to be very important for our next topic here in just a moment. Okay? All right, well, guys, let's go back for a moment to my presentation. So again, for those first many years, starting in the 1600s and continuing into the 1770s, more and more Europeans continued to come to the New World. So let's go ahead and answer some questions, and let's learn a little bit more about this time. Okay? All right, guys, so here comes our first question. So who can answer this for us? Who was living in this country before the Europeans arrived? Who can answer that question for us?
Indians.
That's right. So we could say American Indians, or we can say Native Americans. And believe it or not, this picture that you see here, this particular individual here, he came. This is a true story, or at least we think it's true. He walked into the Plymouth plantation. This may have been the first time, and he actually could speak some English. And they were very surprised. They were like, how did you know English? Well, the truth is, there were English people in the New World before the Pilgrims. They came before 1620, but they were not very successful. But the truth is, he actually knew a few words of English to say hello. So can you imagine the surprise? You're here in this new world, and here comes a Native American, and the first thing he says is hello. That would be pretty surprising, right? So in this case, that actually was a part of the story when they came that first time. But you are correct, Native Americans or American Indians. And now, speaking of natives, let's talk a little bit about those American Indians. So again, before Europeans arrived, there were many native people living in this part of the world. And this is true in other countries like Mexico, again, thinking about South America, these places. They were native populations first before there were Europeans. Now, the question, of course, is how many people were living here? And nobody knows exactly. In fact, some people think there may have been about 50 million natives living in North America, but we don't really know. We don't have any information to help us. Now, if you look at the picture I have here on the screen, again, there are some native people still living in the United States. So, for example, this particular group here, they are part of what we call the Iroquois. Everyone, let's say that, Iroquois. So, yeah, so the Iroquois Nation, you'll find them in different parts of the United States. So here, for example, you can find some of those members living in New York, living in New York State. But you can find other Native American populations still living in the United States. So this brings us to another question that you will see on the test. On the test, you may have to answer, can we name one Native American tribe? Now, we've already learned two names this morning, right? We've learned the Wampanoag, and then we just learned the Iroquois. So remember, the answer, though, is you only need one answer. So in just a moment, I'm going to show you a list that the Citizenship organization, USCIS, that they gave us. But again, you only have to name one. So for example, if you see this young man here, this picture of this young man, he is from the Navajo. So you notice he's wearing a traditional Navajo clothing. Everyone, let's say that name, Navajo.
Navajo.
Yeah. In fact, if you go out west, if you go to New Mexico, or if you go to Arizona, Utah, you can still see many Navajo people and Navajo populations living in those areas. Now, guys, if you look at this next screen, there are a lot of Native American tribes. There were many Native Americans living in this part of the world. But remember, you need only one answer, just one. So again, what I tell students is maybe say a name that's easy for you to pronounce. So if you look at this list, look at this list here. Some of these names are a little difficult. They're difficult for me to pronounce too. But if you notice, some of the names on this list are probably pretty easy to say. So again, my recommendation is maybe you can say Navajo, for example, or yeah, that might be an easier name for you to say. Now, if you just want to listen, just listen real quickly. I'm going to read these names for you. So just listen, okay? So Cherokee, which Cherokee lived in this part of the world, Navajo, Sioux, Chippewa, Choctaw, Pueblo, Apache. There's the next one we talked about, Iroquois, Creek, Blackfeet, Seminole, Cheyenne, Arawak, Shawnee, and Shawnee lived here in Kentucky. They were very much in this area. Inuit, which is near in Alaska. They're the population in Alaska. Okay. Mohegan, Huron, Oneida, Lakota, Crow, Teton, Hopi. Okay, now remember guys, you only need one. You only need to say one of these. So my recommendation is say one that's easy for you to pronounce. So if you want to say Navajo, for example, or Hopi or Pueblo, any of those names would be fine. Okay, and all right, let's move on. Let's talk a little bit more about those pilgrims. Now, if you remember, we said pilgrim, that's not the name. That was not their names. They weren't Mr. and Mrs. Pilgrim. Okay, I know that sounds confusing. But again, pilgrim is referring to the word traveler. So again, we mentioned in French and Spanish, the word peregrino or however you said it in French. We actually have a similar word in
Pilgrim.
English. Yeah, we actually have a similar word, peregrinate, to travel for religious purposes. But for some reason, we use the word pilgrim. So these people were traveling, were trying to go for religious freedom. So that's what pilgrim means. So guys, one of the questions on the test is going to ask about why. Why did these people come to the New World? Well, one reason was because they wanted religious freedom. They wanted religious freedom from the church in England. Okay. Now, of course, many of the other people from Europe, they didn't come just for religious freedom. They came for many reasons. So, for example, before and after the Pilgrims, many more English and European peoples came to the New World. So the Spanish, right, the Portuguese came to the New World, and of course the English came, the French. So again, if you've ever been to Canada, you know, Saba, I think you mentioned you've been to Canada before. You know, they speak French in Canada.
Yes.
Yeah, you might be surprised. Why do they speak French in Canada? Well, that's because it was a French territory. It was part of the French Empire many years ago. Now, the question is, why did all of these people come? Well, they came for many reasons. They came for economic reasons. Many people were very poor. They wanted new opportunities, or they wanted to escape religious and political persecution. Okay, now that's important because the next question we're going to review says, what is one reason why colonists came to America? So how could we answer this question? We only need one answer. What could we say?
They wanted freedom religion.
That's right. So one answer is religious freedom. Can someone give me another reason? Any others?
Good economic.
Yeah, they wanted good economic opportunities.
More
Yeah.
to have more land.
Well, certainly part of that would be economic, yeah. Well, again, if you look here, guys, these are all of the possible answers you can use. So again, you could say freedom, you could say political liberty, religious freedom, economic opportunity. You could say any of these answers, but remember, you only need one answer. So in this case, you could say freedom. That's an easy one, right? We could just say freedom, and there we go. All right, so again, in this case, that would be a perfectly fine answer. Okay, let's continue. Now, guys, in a couple of months, we've got a big holiday coming. Thanksgiving. Do we like Thanksgiving?
Yes.
Elaine, you like Thanksgiving?
Yes. I like turkey.
You like the turkey. I love the turkey. All right. Well, again, you might be wondering, where does the holiday come from? Well, let's return to our lesson for just a moment. Okay, and let's talk a little bit about that. So we mentioned the life in Plymouth, Massachusetts, but remember, those natives, those Wampanoags, they helped the Pilgrims in this first year. So let's go to the story of how their life was getting better. Okay, now, Elaine, would you like to read a little bit for us? I'm going to zoom in for it here. Can you read this for us, Elaine?
Me?
Yeah. You want to try it?
The Indians
Uh-huh.
how the
Pilgrims.
pilgrims with many things. The next autumn, the pil, pil,
Pilgrims. Uh-huh.
pilgrims had a big harvest.
Yeah, so they got lots of food.
There was a lot of food to eat. The pilgrims were very happy.
Uh-huh.
They were thankful to the Indians for their help. They have a uh,
A big
big
feast. Everyone, let's say that word, feast.
big feast
Yeah,
together.
feast. So feast is like a big dinner, like a big meal.
Uh-huh. The Indians gave them more food. We call the first feast Thanksgiving.
All right, everyone, let's say that. Thanksgiving.
Feast.
We like Thanksgiving?
Thanksgiving.
We like Thanksgiving, right?
Yeah.
Sylvain,
Yes,
Sylvain,
we
have
like.
you do. Good. Sylvain, do you eat Thanksgiving? Sylvain, have you tried Thanksgiving, Sylvain? Let's see. Let's see if he can tell us. Sylvain, do you like turkey?
Yes, I like.
You like turkey. You like Thanksgiving.
Yeah,
All
yes,
right.
it's
Okay, well, we're going to come to your house for Thanksgiving, okay? We're going to eat turkey at your house, okay?
okay, okay.
Okay, you make it. All right, good. He's going to make dinner for us. Okay. Well, here's the picture. So if you notice that picture, now guys, again, this is not a photograph, all right? This is not a selfie of Thanksgiving. This is a painting. It probably did not happen like this. But many Americans, we see this first moment of pilgrims and Indians coming together to celebrate the pilgrims that first year that they were had food and they survived. That is why we celebrate Thanksgiving. So in this case, that first meal with the native population, that's why we as Americans celebrate this important day. So that very first Thanksgiving was a very, very important time in our lives. Okay, and that's why we celebrate it every November. Okay, guys, now one of the questions on the test is talking about holidays. Now, one of the questions asks, can you name two national holidays? Well, we just discussed one of them right now, and that, of course, is Thanksgiving Day. So Thanksgiving Day, of course, is one holiday. It's usually the fourth Thursday in November. So in this case, we don't know exactly when they celebrated this day, so we just chose this time to celebrate. Now, guys, let's talk about some other holidays in the United States. So I'm going to show you some pictures. Can you tell me what these holidays are? Okay, look at the first picture. What holiday is this? Do you know?
I think it's July 4th.
Yeah, 4th of July, Independence Day. Okay.
Yeah, Independence Day.
What about this next picture? Do we know this person?
Martin Luther King.
Martin Luther.
Yeah, Martin Luther King. Now, don't forget King there, Elena, because Martin Luther was a different person, a very important person, but a different person. So in this case, Martin Luther King Jr. Yeah, so Martin Luther King Jr. Day is in January. Okay, does anybody know this holiday?
Memorial Day?
You're close. Memorial Day is for those people who died in the military. This day is for people who are still alive. So
Veterans.
Veterans Day, very good, Elena. And Veterans Day is also in November. Okay, here's one more. Everybody knows this one, right?
Christmas.
Yeah, this is not Green Tree Day. So this is Christmas Day. Okay.
Christmas.
Yeah, so once again, guys, you only need two answers for this question. So you can say Thanksgiving Day, you can say Independence Day. Everyone, let's say that. Independence Day.
Independence Day.
Good. Okay. Let's say Martin Luther King Jr. Day.
Martin Luther
Martin
King
Luther King
Jr.
Jr.
Day.
Day.
Now, sometimes we just say MLK, MLK, because that's a little shorter, right? So some people say MLK. Okay. All right. The next one, let's say it together. Veterans Day.
Veterans Day.
Veterans Day.
Yeah, so that one is always November 11th. Now, guys, here's a little surprise for you. November 11th is also going to be the 400th anniversary of the Pilgrims coming to the New World. So we've actually got two important days coming up in November for November 11th. All right, and finally, we mentioned this one already, Christmas Day.
Christmas Day.
And Christmas Day is in December,
25.
right? December 25th. All right, very good. Okay, well, guys, we've gone through the first historical topic for today. Now we're going to move into our second topic, and that is looking at colonial history until we separated from England. So this is going to be our next lesson. So let's go ahead and jump in. Okay, now often when we talk about this time period, we think about those important Americans who helped us become a new country. So again, one of the very first people we're going to talk about, his name is Thomas Jefferson. Everyone, let's say that name, Thomas Jefferson.
Thomas Jefferson.
Jefferson.
So Thomas Jefferson was, again, a very important figure in the history of the United States. So I'm going to read a little bit, and then I'm going to get you guys to help me. Okay, so first off, Thomas Jefferson was an important leader in our history. So he was born in Virginia in 1743. Now, here's a little surprise for you. Kentucky? Kentucky was originally part of Virginia. So Virginia and Kentucky were actually part of the same land. They were connected to each other. So in this case, we here in Kentucky, we were part of Virginia for many, many years. Now, Thomas Jefferson did many important things, but probably the most important thing he did was he wrote the Declaration of Independence. Everyone, let's say that together. Let's try it slowly. Declaration of Independence.
Of Independence.
Yeah, so that's why we have Independence Day. We have the Declaration of Independence. Now, that's probably one of the things that Thomas Jefferson is most famous for. Now, the truth is he was also many other things too. For example, he was the third president of the United States. Now, he did not think that that was a good time for him. So it's interesting. He didn't talk a lot about being the president in his own history. He thought the Declaration was more important in his life. But still, he was president from 1801 to 1809. So he was president for a few years. And something we will talk about in a later lesson is during that time, one of the important things he did was he helped the United States grow to get bigger. So we'll talk about this a little bit more in the future. But something you will learn is that he also helped buy what we call the Louisiana Territory from France in 1803. So again, we'll talk about that more in the future. But he also did many other things. For example, he started the University of Virginia. In fact, the university's library was his personal library. He donated all of the books to that university. Now, I have lots of books here in my house, but I don't think I have enough for my own university library. And then he died. Look at the date. He died on July 4th. That's true. He actually died on Independence Day in 1826. In fact, we're going to learn another famous American died on the same day. So I'll talk about that in just a moment. But if you look at these pictures here, so there's Thomas Jefferson. This is his home. His home, you can actually visit. It's called Monticello. So he designed it himself. He was the architect. And again, we'll talk more about the Louisiana Purchase in the future. Okay, so we're not going to focus on that today. But again, Thomas Jefferson is one of those first Americans that we need to learn, because on the test there are many Americans that you have to know during the interview. Okay. Now, of course, one of the most important things he did was he wrote the Declaration of Independence. So, Saba, I'm going to ask you once again, can you help us and read this first part here about the Declaration?
Okay. The Declaration of Independence is an important document for Americans. In the 1700s,
1700s, there you go.
1700s, the colonists were angry with Great Britain. They said Great Britain did not respect the colonies' rights. The colonies wanted to be free from Great Britain. The colonies wanted to declare their independence. Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence.
All right, very good. Now, the Declaration of Independence, the document, that's what you see here. We'll take a look at it in just a moment, a little bit closer. But actually, you can see copies of the Declaration of Independence. In fact, about 2 years ago, one of the original copies came to Cincinnati. You could actually go and see it. But of course, you can see it in different places. Of course, you can go to Washington, D.C. and Philadelphia to see copies of the Declaration of Independence. Now, why was that declaration so important? Well, let's go on to the next part here, okay? Now, I'm going to read this next section. The Declaration of Independence says that all men, okay, now sorry women, sorry ladies, so Elena, Saba, Elaine, bad news. At the time, when they used the word men, they were talking about men, sorry. Of course, today we think about it as everybody. But again, this is the 1700s, so please remember that that was a different time.
Women, I think that's why the women, they make a like a suffrage and
yes, that is, women wanted to vote. So Saba, you've learned about that, right?
Yeah.
But unfortunately, guys, in the 1700s, women did not have many rights. But again, today we understand this to mean everybody. Okay, so not just men. But it did say that all men are created equal, which means that all men are basically the same. There are no kings, right? No queens. See, England had kings. England had queens. In fact, many countries had kings and queens. But here in this new world, this new country, they did not want kings. They wanted everybody to be equal, especially in the law. So the thing I want us to learn about here this morning is the importance of what the Declaration says. Because what it says is that there are 3 rights that everybody has. Now, guys, everybody means you too. So even if you're not an American citizen right now, you have these rights too, because you live here in this in the United States. So these 3 words that we're going to learn, these 3 phrases, let's say them together. So everyone, these 3 rights are life. Everyone, let's say it. Life.
Life.
Liberty.
Liberty.
Pursuit of happiness.
Pursuit
of happiness.
Now you might say, Mr. John, what's a suit? I don't need a suit. What's a pursuit? No, it's not a suit. It's a pursuit. Pursuit means to follow. To follow. Yeah. So, for example, what makes you happy? What makes you happy? Tell me, what makes you happy? Nothing makes us happy? Come on, guys. Something makes us happy.
Freedom.
Freedom, yeah.
A good life.
A good life, that's good.
Have a good job.
Good job. How about pizza? Does pizza make you happy?
Good family.
Family, okay.
Yeah.
Ice cream, does ice cream make you happy?
Yes.
Of course, come on, yeah.
Good food.
Well, see, that's what's interesting here. What the Declaration is saying, that your happiness, so Saba, Elena, Elaine, Sylvain, all of your happiness, you all have different ideas of happiness. Maybe it's family, maybe it's freedom, maybe it's this. But what the Declaration is saying is that we all should have the opportunity for happiness. You don't tell me what makes me happy. I can follow my happiness. Now, what I would like to do for just a moment, I'm going to leave this lesson and go back to my presentation because I think it's important. Let me jump ahead for just a moment. let me jump ahead to this part of the Declaration. So what I did is I took this specific part of the Declaration of Independence. On the left side is the original language. And then I used colors just to help you understand what these words mean. Because again, this is language from 1776. So that's kind of a little bit different from the language we speak today. But over on the right side is kind of a translation to help you understand it. Now, what I'm going to do real quickly is read the left side and then talk about the right side. I think we should do this right now. So I'm going to do it, okay? So just follow and listen. We hold these truths to be self-evident, okay? Now, look at the right side. The right side, it means we believe. So we hold. We believe that these things are obvious and true to everyone. So that's what it means when we think of self-evident. It means everybody understands this. So when Thomas Jefferson was writing the Declaration, he was saying, we think these things are true for everyone. Okay, so let's go back to the original. That all men are created equal. So look at the right side. All men are equal before the law. No kings, no queens. You and me, we are just people. We're just people. You're not better than me, and I'm not better than you. We're all the same. Okay, let's continue. That they are endowed by their creator. Now, creator in this case means the word God. Now, but notice it doesn't say Christian God necessarily. So again, it means who you believe. Your God, the God of nature, the God that created us. So it could be, the God from this religion. It's your interpretation. So the idea is we believe that God has given us these freedoms, not the government. The government doesn't give us. That when we are born as little babies, that God gives us these freedoms to let us be free. So again, look at that last part. It says, I'm going to go to the left side, with certain unalienable rights. You might say unalienable. Well, what that means is these are rights that we have, and you cannot take them away. They're my rights. When I'm born as a free person, and the government cannot take those away. So when Thomas Jefferson said, we think these rights are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, what he means is that you have the right to live. Isn't that good? Don't we have the right to live? Absolutely. We want to live. We don't want the government to attack us. We want to have freedom, right? We like freedom. So Elaine likes freedom, freedom to eat pizza. Okay. And then finally, we want to follow our own happiness. The government is not going to tell me what makes me happy. I can choose my happiness. Now think about that. So the Declaration of Independence was trying to say, not England, not the king, not the queen, not the government. We are free because we are born as people. God gives us these freedoms. That's why the Declaration of Independence is so important for every American, because it tells us what those freedoms are. So guys, let's say those three freedoms one more time. Let's say them. Liberty,
Liberty,
life,
Liberty,
life,
life,
pursuit of
pursuit of
happiness.
pursuit of
Pursuit of
happiness.
happiness.
Excellent. Do we believe in these things?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
I hope so. Yes, we want to be free. We want to live and be free. So that's what we believe here with the Declaration. Okay, now let me go back for just a moment. So I jumped ahead a little bit. So once again, let's answer this first question. Who wrote the Declaration of Independence? Who wrote it?
Thomas
Thomas
Jefferson.
That's right,
Jefferson.
Thomas Jefferson. Okay. Now, once again, we mentioned three rights, so we only need to name two. What are two rights they mention in the Declaration of Independence?
Life,
Life,
liberty,
liberty, and we can say number
pursuit,
three, the pursuit
Pursuit of
pursuit
of
happiness.
happiness. Yeah, there it is. By the way, guys, see this picture here? That's a copy of the Declaration of Independence. Now, can you see how small the words are? It's very difficult to read. It's very small. So I would not recommend reading the original copy because it's impossible to read. But you can go to the internet and read it. But it is difficult to understand. Okay? All right, and then finally, when was the Declaration of Independence adopted? Guys, this is easy. Look at the top of the document. What does it say?
July
1775.
July.
Yeah, July 4th, 1776.
76.
Now you can understand why July 4th is so important. That is the day. Now, here's the truth. It actually is not the day, but don't tell anybody, okay? So for some reason we say July 4th, but actually it's not July 4th. But we somehow, for some reason, we say July 4th. Okay, so just remember that. But the truth is it was not. All right, so anyway, the answer is July 4th, 1776. Now, guys, that date is very important for you. It's very important for every American. Okay, so when we are finished today, I want you to go to a tattoo place and get a tattoo right here that says July 4th, 1776. Okay? Can you do that? Okay, sure, of course. Okay, well, no, we've got coronavirus. Don't do that now. But that date is very important, guys. Every American knows this date. Okay? Okay, now let's finish talking about the colonial history real quickly by talking about the original colonies. Now, you might remember we talked about these places last week, but we're going to talk about them again here today. There are 13 original colonies. So if you remember, there are 13 stripes on the flag. And
Yeah.
so on the test, we have to name 3 of them. We have to name 3 of them. Now, once again, I'll bring up the map. Now, let's look at the names real quickly one more time. Everyone, let's say these names together one more time. We're going to say all of them just so we can make sure we can pronounce them. So, guys, I'm going to start at the top. Let's say them together. New Hampshire.
New Hampshire.
New York.
New York.
Massachusetts.
Massachusetts.
Rhode Island.
Rhode Island.
Connecticut.
Connecticut.
Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania.
New Jersey.
New Jersey.
Delaware.
Delaware.
Virginia.
Virginia.
Maryland.
Maryland.
North Carolina.
North
North
Carolina.
Carolina.
South Carolina.
South
South
Carolina.
Carolina.
Sorry. And Georgia.
Georgia.
Now remember, you only need 3. So one thing I can recommend is maybe use the states that have the word new in them. That might be easier for you to remember. So New Jersey, New Hampshire, New York. But again, you can say any 3 from this list. Okay, so again, but my advice is maybe make it easy and just choose the new states. New York, New Jersey, and New Hampshire. So, but again, you only need 3. Okay, so just remember you only need to name 3. But if you want to surprise and amaze your American neighbors, you can say, I know all 13 colonies. Maybe you can memorize them. Okay, but in this case, I got news for you. I don't know if many Americans can remember all 13 of them, but the idea is you only need 3. All right. Now, guys, this last part of our lesson is going to be focusing on what we call the famous faces, because there is a part of the interview that mentions a lot of people. So we already talked about Thomas Jefferson, but let's learn about some other famous founding fathers. Okay? Now, the first one I think everybody probably knows. Who is this person?
Washington.
Yeah, it's George Washington. And if you notice, we call George Washington, one of his nicknames is the father of our country. Yeah, so now why? Well, because he was the first president. But he was also a famous general. So he fought in colonial America. He fought, originally he fought for the British against the French many, many years before. But then he became a colonial general for Americans to fight against the British. Now, he helped the United States win the War of Independence. So again, the colonists, we fought against England, and we fought for that War of Independence. So again, that War of Independence took many, many years. In fact, I'm going to return for just a moment to the lesson. See if I can. Okay. So for just a moment, in that War of Independence, let's talk about that war, because we see a picture of General Washington there at the bottom. So as you can see here, these colonists were basically, again, fighting against the British because they wanted that freedom. Now, if you look at that question, it says, why did the colonists fight the British? Well, there were many reasons. Of course, one reason was they wanted freedom. So let's look at the reasons they've listed here. One reason was because of high taxes. The British were charging very high taxes to the colonists for all kinds of things, for tea, for example, for paper, for anything that needed to be shipped between countries. So in this case, it was becoming very difficult for them. Another problem was that when the British Army was fighting, they often would go into the colonists' houses, but not with permission. They would just enter into the house and stay there. Now, this was not true of all of the colonies. It was actually true of just a few of them. But that was becoming a problem, especially in Massachusetts. So in this case, they didn't like that. But I think the bigger reason is because many of those colonists, they wanted their own government. They didn't want a king. That king was in England, thousands of miles away. They wanted their own government here in the New World. So in this case, I think that's probably one of the biggest reasons. They wanted that particular freedom to be their own government. They wanted self-government. Now remember, on the interview, you have to give one answer to this question. So again, I might say, because of high taxes is an easy answer. But again, the colonists did not have self-government. That was very important. In fact, at the time, many of them complained. They said, let's see if I can make it smaller there. So they called it taxation without representation. So they thought it was not fair that the British were giving, very high taxes, right? So taxation without representation. So that means they were paying taxes, but they had no representation in England. So that's why they wanted to fight. They wanted their own representation. Now, again, the War of Independence started in 1775. They began fighting, but then the actual declaration was 1776. And if you see this little painting here of George Washington, he was a general in that battle. So again, George Washington was sort of like a hero, somebody that everybody knew because of this war. And eventually the colonists won the war in 1783. So it took about 7 years to finally get their independence. And those colonies, those 13 colonies, they became the first 13 states. Believe it or not, Kentucky was not one of those states, right? Kentucky was not in the 13. Kentucky was actually number 15. So just to tell everybody, just because sometimes students want to say, Mr. John, what about Kentucky? All right, well, let's continue. All right, so of course, George Washington, very famous person, he did become the first president. And that was very important because making him the first president meant everybody was going to like him. Now, guys, we see Washington in many places, right? By the way, do we know this coin? What coin is this? Does anybody know?
Quarter.
It's the quarter. Yes, so Washington is on the quarter.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he's also on the dollar bill.
Yeah.
Now, because he was the first president, we call him the father of our country. And there's a reason why Washington's on the one, because he's the first. Now, you might say, but isn't he important? It's only $1. Yeah, but he was number one, right? Okay. All right, guys. Now, I'm sorry, we're probably going to go a few minutes extra, but let's see if we can get through these next famous people quickly. All right, so the next person on our list is John Adams. Everyone, let's say that, John Adams.
John Adam.
Adam.
Now, John Adams was the second president. Now, you might say, Mr. John, why is that so important? Well, one reason it was important was because for the first time in the history of the world, when George Washington stopped being president, usually in countries, people would fight, right, to become the next leader, to become the next king, but not in the United States. Instead, we had a peaceful change. When George Washington retired, we had this next president. We elected, we voted for this next person. That was really the first time in the history of the world that we had a peaceful change between one leader and the next. So one thing you need to remember, John Adams was the second president. That's very important. And John Adams also was a very important American. He was a well-known lawyer. He was a farmer, but he also was a diplomat, which means that he traveled to other countries. He traveled to England, for example, during the War of Independence to help negotiate with the British during that time. So again, the second president was John Adams. All right, does anybody recognize this next person? We may have seen him in other classes before. Okay, yeah, it's Benjamin Franklin. So Benjamin Franklin was another famous American. In fact, he was probably the most famous. Everybody knew Benjamin Franklin because he was a writer. If you notice, he wrote a book called Poor Richard's Almanac. So many people loved this book. As you can see the year there, 1739. So his book was very popular in early America. Now, on the test, in the interview, they ask, can you name one thing that Benjamin Franklin was famous for? But the truth is there were many things he was famous for. So, for example, he started the first free libraries. Okay, that's pretty important. He traveled to France as a diplomat. So again, during the War of Independence, Franklin went to France to get France to help us in the War of Independence. So Franklin actually was very important in that. And then here's something I mentioned in my other classes. So I don't know, Elaine and Saba, you might remember I talked about the post office. Well, remember, Benjamin Franklin was the first postmaster general. He actually helped start those first post offices. Now,
I
guys,
remember.
you remember that? Good. Okay, well, in this case, guys, just remember, you only need one answer for that question. So again, you can say he started the first free libraries, or you can say he was the first postmaster general. Okay, guys, we're almost finished with the famous Americans. This last American we're going to talk about, his name is Alexander Hamilton. Everyone, let's say that. Alexander Hamilton.
Alexander Hamilton.
Very good. Now, why is he famous? Well, first off, he was an assistant to General Washington during the War of Independence. So he was very important in that. Now, what's interesting is Hamilton was not born in the United States. He was actually born in the West Indies. Now, after the War of Independence, he was given his citizenship. In fact, all people were given their citizenship after the war. But another important thing is that he was the first Secretary of the Treasury. In other words, he handled the money for the New World, for our new country. And he actually did something very helpful. He helped establish the first bank of the United States. Now remember, at this time, the colonies all had different monies. They all had different bills. Hamilton suggested that maybe we should all have the same money, all 13 of the states, which was a good idea, right? I mean, if you had Kentucky money and you travel to Ohio and they say, we don't take Kentucky money, that would be a problem, right? So,
Yeah.
and of course, you might travel from Massachusetts to New York and they would give you, a terrible exchange for the money. So Hamilton
It
said,
was in, I think, Mr. John, it was in Europe.
well,
But
certainly
now,
yeah, you have the euro now in Europe.
yeah,
Yeah, that was always
yeah.
a problem. But Hamilton suggested we should use the same currency, the same money. So now, but on the interview, guys, one of the reasons why Hamilton is so important is because he and two other people wrote a very important book. It wasn't actually a book, it was kind of a collection of essays or newspaper articles. Now, the name of that book was called The Federalist Papers. Everyone, let's say that together. The Federalist Papers.
There is.
Yeah, and actually I've been reading some of the Federalist Papers again. But the reason why Hamilton is so important is because Hamilton, James Madison, and John Jay, they wrote a series of articles, and the Federalist Papers were very important because they helped explain what was going to be in the new Constitution. Now, next week, we're going to talk about the Constitution. So we'll talk more about that next week. But the Federalist was a very important document because nobody understood what was going to be in the new Constitution. So they wrote these articles, and they would, put them in newspapers, and, eventually they made them a book, and people could read what was going to be in that Constitution. So again, Hamilton was very important. There were 85 articles in the Federalist Papers. He wrote 51 of them. So he was pretty important. And then, of course, James Madison, if you see his picture over here, he became the 4th president of the United States. He wrote 29. So he and Hamilton wrote most of the articles. But again, Hamilton is important because he wrote the Federalist Papers. Okay, so guys, we need to remember that. Okay, guys, now I'm sorry we're going to go just a few minutes extra, but I want to try a little fun game right now. Okay, so here's how we're going to play. Since our time is very short, we're going to play it together. But in this activity, I'm going to show you on the screen the founding fathers, so those people we just talked about, and what are some things they are famous for. So again, I was going to put this in the chat box, but we don't have time to do it. So instead, we're going to just work together. So I'm going to go ahead and bring it up on the screen. Okay, so I'm going to put the founding fathers over on the left side. So I hope you can see those. Okay, and then I'm going to put these words, these phrases over on the right side. Okay, all right, guys, now I want you to help me out. Let's see if we can match the reason on the right side with the people on the left. So for example, who was the father of our country?
George Washington.
George Washington, congratulations. All right, here's the next one. Who was the writer of the Declaration of Independence?
Benjamin.
No, Adams.
Alexander.
Help. No.
No.
Thomas Jefferson.
Thomas Jefferson. Congratulations, Elena. Okay, who was the 2nd president of the United States?
John Adams.
John
Adams.
Adams. Very good. Who started the first free libraries?
Alexander.
No.
Benjamin.
Franklin. Yeah. Okay, who was the first president of the United States?
George
Washington.
That's right. So we have 2 answers here for George Washington, and that's because on the citizenship interview, he actually has answers for 2 questions. Okay, and then finally, who was one of the writers of the Federalist Papers?
Alexander
Hamilton. Congratulations. All right, let's say it one more time. So Benjamin Franklin helped start the first free libraries. John Adams was the 2nd president of the United States. Alexander Hamilton is one of the writers of the Federalist Papers. Thomas Jefferson was the writer of the Declaration of Independence. And finally, George Washington is the father of our country, and he was the 1st president. All right, congratulations. We did it. Okay. All right, now guys, we're going to stop here for today, but I want to go ahead and show you an activity that you can practice at home. Now, many students have talked about how difficult it is to do the writing part of the test, especially because the writing section of the test has many proper names. Now, you might say, well, Mr. John, what is a proper name? Well, a proper name includes the names of the presidents. So, for example, in the writing section of the test, there are 3 presidents that they mention. Places in the United States. So, again, some of those places like Alaska might be a problem to write. Of course, months of the year. So, September, December, October. Holidays. So, again, the holidays are considered proper names. And then there are a few other proper words that use capital letters. Now, this activity is something you can practice at home. Now, everybody, I want you to raise your right hand. Okay, so everybody raise your right hand, not your left hand. This is your left hand. Raise your right hand.
Yeah.
Okay, now everybody, so repeat after me. I promise.
I promise.
To practice these words.
To practice these words.
Many times.
Many times.
All right, congratulations. Okay, now let me show you real quickly how the activity works. Now, again, just because our time is getting short, we're not going to have time to review the words together, but I will show you when you look at the writing vocabulary. So I hope everybody had a chance to start looking at the writing vocabulary. But for example, if you look at the first one where it says people. So as I said before, for example, there are 3 proper names: Adams, Lincoln, and Washington. Now, you guys, you need to know how to write their names. Now, obviously for students, it's hard because we, copy, practice, practice, practice. That's important. It's important to practice. But Mr. John, wonderful Mr. John, has created something to help you to practice at home. Are we excited?
Yes.
Of course we are. Yes, Mr. John. All right, well, here's what I've done for you. So I've created a little activity that you can practice at home. Now, again, we don't have time to do it here this morning, but I will make another short video to help explain how to do this activity. But let me show you real quickly how it works. You can practice with this at home. So I'll send it to you in your email. So this activity, I have divided all of the proper names into different groups. So we have famous names, holidays, American places, months of the year, and then other words on the test that are also proper. Now, here's how it works. Okay, now I'm going to click on the first one for famous names. Okay, now you can practice with the names. In fact, you can practice listening to the names. Let me make sure that we can hear it. Okay, so I'm going to turn on the audio. There we go. So everyone just listen. I'm going to go through these 3 real quickly. Just listen.
Adams, capital D A M S, Adams.
Okay.
Washington, capital W A S H I N G T O N.
Okay. So again, you can listen to the names, you can listen to the letters and how they're spelled, and then you can do some practice. Now, the practice one, you click on the practice link. And again, if you have a phone, you can do this on the phone too. Okay, it'll work on the phone. So Sylvain, Elaine, Saba, if you're using the phone, you can use it on the phone. But so notice it says spell Adams. So what you'll do here is using your keyboard or using your phone, you'll type in how to spell Adams. Now, if you want to listen again, it'll repeat the word for you. Because remember, on the test, they're going to say the word Adams, so they'll use it in a sentence, but they'll say the word. Now, how do I spell Adams? Let's see, let's try it. A-D-A-M-S. Okay, now if I want to check the answer, good, congratulations. And then, so you can practice with the names, and then you can also take a little quiz, like a little test. Okay, so let's listen.
Spell Washington.
So I have to spell Washington. If I want to repeat it,
Washington.
so then I have to spell it. Now, I'm not going to do it here, but you can practice with it at home. Now, when you're finished with the names, you click here with the arrow, and you can practice with the other words that I have put together for you from the writing vocabulary. Okay? Now, guys, you have to practice. You have to practice at home. Okay? I can't help you if you don't practice. So I've created this activity that you can practice at home. You can use it on your phone. You can use it on the computer. Again, I'll make a short video just to review this. But guys, you have to practice this at home. Okay? All right, so do we promise we're going to practice?
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
I will.
Okay.
Yes, we
Yes.
promise.
All right.
Yes.
Absolutely. Okay, let me see. Let me turn on Sylvain's microphone. Sylvain, are you going to practice, Sylvain?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead. Good answer. I like it. Okay. So, everybody, I'm sorry we went a few minutes extra, but again, I just want you guys to remember, you can practice at home. And I've also created some ways that you can practice with the 100 questions. So again, I'll make a short video to explain how you can practice with these new review cards that I have created for you. Okay, so again, I don't want to take any more time this morning, but I will put that video together and send it to you in your email, and I'll also put it on our website. Okay, but the nice thing about this is I've put all of the questions, all 100 questions, and I've divided them into their topics. So again, you can practice these at home, But here are all the 100 questions. They're divided in all their different topics. But if you also just want to practice all 100 questions, you can practice all of them too. Okay? But again, I will make a short video and I'll send it to you, hopefully this afternoon or tomorrow, and you can practice with these at home. But these are all of the 100 questions, and it's a good way for you to review this information. Okay, so I've also done that for you. That's because I like you. So that's why I did it. All right, everybody. I'm sorry we went a little long this morning, but we had a lot of information today, a lot of stuff to talk about.